welcome back to another episode of Blam Blam Truckers. I will actually say it this time.
Thanks.
I am Beas. That over there, or possibly over there, is Beas.
Hi.
And today, we have another segment of If You Were Gonna. And what we do in If You Were Gonna is we talk about what we would like to do with a particular franchise or story, and what we would do to do our own spin on it for future things. So, today's episode, in honor of this being May the 4th weekend, it's Luna Lovegood.
No.
We are talking about Star Wars. Or Star Wars. The clone trooper in his hand. The Grogu on my shirt. The Boba Fett on my shirt. So,
Greedo on your forehead?
the Greedo on my forehead.
Or hat? Is that Greedo, or is it just, some Rhodian?
I have no idea. My wife bought the hat for me. To start off with, Beas, why would you like to change or affect Star Wars?
Because I grew up with Star Wars. You and I have spent decades talking about it. It's something I have a passion for, and I think I can do a great job. I've come up with thousands of Star Wars stories over the years, both for RPGs and fan fiction, and one novel attempt that never quite got off the ground. I think I have a lot of great ideas that other people would love and enjoy.
If you were to gain control of Star Wars, what...
You make me sound like Palpatine. Now, I have disbanded the Senate.
If you were to be able to have influence on Star Wars storytelling, is there a particular time frame that you would want to set the next series or movie or whatever in?
It would be around the original trilogy. I used to have a lot of different time frames that I thought it would work, but I'm pretty sure this is the best one after Revenge of the Sith and before A New Hope. The reason why is because one of the biggest problems with Star Wars, one of the fundamental problems with trying to tell a story in the Star Wars universe, is that George Lucas never fully explained the setting. And this was by design. He didn't want to waste time in the movies telling you every little detail about how the world works. He wanted you to jump in, get the gist, and go have a great time, which is good. But what needs to be explained for people to actually be able to write in any setting is what the setting is. And maybe not all the most minute details, but the grand picture of how the universe, the world that he created, the universe he created actually works. Some of the nitty gritty, but also the broad strokes. Like, how could the Republic control all of known space and not have a standing army? We've never seen that on Earth. It's never explained in the movies itself, not directly. There's hints, but how does that work? What impact did Jedi actually have on society? Mostly we just see them, kicking Grogu and taking names. Hi, shoulder guy.
Hi, shoulder guy. Oh, he's getting a little bit blurred out. Oh, well.
Well, so that's why I think it's the ideal time period to explain things, because it's a time period that's where we see the difference between where we're going to find out the changes that happened after Palpatine took over. And to explain the changes after Palpatine took over, we need to know how it worked before that. Not just that it worked, but how it worked, why these things actually made sense. And until writers have a sense of that, they can't effectively keep continuity. And continuity is basically a fictional world's word for history.
Mhm.
If you don't keep continuity with reality, you're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But you're going to come up with things like World War II never happened in reality, and World War II clearly happened. There are still people alive who fought in it. Not that many anymore, but There were. We still have records, video records, historical records, newspapers of all these events that happened. Without an understanding of your history, you don't really understand the world around you. And that is just as true in reality as it is in fantasy. And that's why I would choose that time period.
Do you have an idea for a cast of characters for your story?
Would you like me to actually tell you what the story is, or do you want me to go into the cast? Because one
I
kind of
would.
goes before the other.
I understand. There is a method to my madness, and I wasn't
Okay.
asking you to go into the cast. I just was wondering, did you have an idea for them?
Yeah, I have a pretty solid idea of the characters I would actually want.
And are any of them force sensitive? I won't say force users, but are any of them force sensitive?
Not as far as they know.
Fair
At the
enough.
beginning of the story, not as far as the audience knows. I'm not
Okay.
sure what direction I'd go in. I'm not sure what Disney would actually allow me to play with if I ever got this shot. At the beginning of the story, nobody's force sensitive.
Okay, cool. So similar to like a Finn type thing?
No, Finn, we found out, was force sensitive very early on.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, at least by the middle to end of the Force
I have
Awakens.
no plans in this particular story to
Mhm.
introduce anyone who's force sensitive. So I don't want to do a movie. I want to do a series.
Okay.
And if I just got one shot, it would be a series, whether it's a mini series or I'd actually get a full 23 episode season or a series of seasons. That would be awesome. But it would start as a series at the beginning of it. The story I have planned for the first arc would not be a force sensitive story.
Give me the basics of what your story would actually be about.
Corsec, CSI. No, um, it would be a police procedural story set in the Star Wars universe, starting around Corellia with Corellian Security, or Corsec, which was their peacekeeping organization, their police for the Corellian system, which had five habitable planets. And it would expand from there to Corsec was what Corellian security called their sector rangers. And so it would actually end up covering the entire Corellian sector. And eventually the Duros sector, as we see Palpatine making changes for political reasons to garner more control into his iron fist.
Okay.
And also their interaction with other sectors and other sector ranger groups.
Very nice. Since you mentioned Corsec,
Mm-hmm.
would you, just like Disney has done in other cases, if you had the opportunity, would you want to even touch briefly on some of the Corsec characters that we had ever touched on in the EU? You know how,
Yes.
like, Filioni brought in Thrawn and stuff. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So ideally, it wouldn't be
Mhm.
Corran Horn. It would be his father. Wow. I had his name on the top of my tongue.
Hal
Hal Horn.
Hal Horn.
I was thinking of Rostek or whatever his name was. But Hal Horn, maybe if he's not the main character, which I would love for him to be the main character, so maybe I could take that back about him not knowing he was force sensitive. But that also goes, we've got lots of problems with Jedi not marrying and dealing with the EU, which we talked about in a recent episode, or maybe before this, depending on when the order goes out. I wouldn't mind having Hal Horn in there as a supporting character or as a main character.
Based on it being Corsec, how much of your workings and knowledge of Corsec would be based off of EU, and about how much would be based off of just your own research and real life experiences with, law enforcement and such like that?
Unfortunately, there's not that much about Corsec in the EU. And while I would probably incorporate most, if not all, of what Michael Stackpole and the few others who touched upon Corsec did, that would only give me the broad strokes for the setting.
Yeah, pretty much it was
Like,
only Stackpole and Zahn that really touched on it, from what I understand.
it would be in season 2 or season 3 that Flurry Vuru, or whatever his name was, would actually take over as he would already be the senator from Corellia, but he would start closing his iron grip because he ended up making a lot of decisions there. Or maybe he would finally be elected. I don't know.
Well, he's eventually made Moff, yeah.
Yeah, Moff. That's what it was, which is another word for governor. I would definitely want that to be a storyline and seeing the impact of that on the story, because as much as the viewer, the audience, is going to love the bigger story and the growth of the characters, which is something about police procedurals that um, I love. Like watching Criminal Minds, I don't really care so much about who the serial killer of the week is. I'm interested. I want to see them have their adventure and find the killer and stop him, of course. But I'm more interested in the growth of Derek Morgan or Dr. Reed or JJ now that she's back. I'm rewatching it. I've actually hit seasons I never got around to before. I'm more interested in how those characters interact and how they grow. That's really what keeps people coming back to these series. And episode after episode, it's not just the story, it's the growth of the characters over time. So that's going to be the appeal for the audience, that and the overarching story and seeing the world change. That's really where my bread and butter is as the creator. That's why I would pick this time frame and this part of the galaxy and this particular story to tell, because it shows us how Corsec has to change. Carillion security, all the political ramifications of the emperor becoming, not just declaring himself emperor, 19 years before the Battle of Yavin, but all the changes, how that filters down, and how the end of the Jedi Order changes the very fabric of the Republic, and how the Emperor has to build up the military and start replacing Corsec in ways and taking away some of their responsibilities, because he needs to replace those with his own people and his own Imperial security agents, whether that's Imperial intelligence from the military or that's the ISB, and seeing the growth of the ISB. That would be that would be the reason I would want to do this time period. And I know I've gone way beyond the scope of your question here,
That's fine.
but that would be why I would want to use this time period, is to show how totalitarian, and the change from a free government to a totalitarian government, um, and the impact on the society, and why people were groaning under the heel of the Emperor and Vader.
Okay. So this is going to be more of a semi-practical question. You'd mentioned before that you would like to have like a full season, but when you say a full season, you mean like a normal TV full season as opposed to a streaming season.
Ideally 23 episodes. It's a police procedural. There's a lot of stories we can do based off of real life set in the Star Wars setting. So a bank robbery, a hostage situation, stopping smuggling, fighting against, whether it's, you've got gun runners. This is all in Star Wars already. You've got drug dealers, gun runners, slavers. All of those things are things Corsec needs to stop, and it's done both in space and on planet. And they work in conjunction with other sectors and other planets inside the Carillion sector. But it's also other sectors that they go out to. And the Carillion sector has the best fleet, arguably, for a sector fleet, if not the best, one of the best. And the deals they have to make with other sectors so that they can get jurisdiction to go in there and pursue criminals, because a criminal in the days of the Old Republic, according to West End Games, could escape pursuit by leaving one sector and getting into another sector, which is based off the Wild Wild West, where if you left one territory, say the Montana territory, which wasn't the name of the territory at the time, but if you leave one state and go to another state, or one territory and go to another territory in the Old West, then your local police couldn't follow you anymore. They no longer had jurisdiction. You only had to deal with U.S. Marshals, but there are no U.S. Marshals in Star Wars. There's no equivalent.
The closest equivalent was Jedi, which at this point wouldn't be around.
Jedi were far more than that and didn't really deal with small criminals as much as bigger threats. So you may have to deal with bounty hunters, but you had to deal with that in the Old West too. They didn't respect jurisdiction the way that regular law enforcement would. Sector rangers for Star Wars.
So back to my question.
All right.
From a practical perspective.
Yes. I want to do 23 episodes ideally, and maybe 4 or 5 seasons.
Okay, so from a practical perspective,
yeah,
are you imagining, this was my original question, are you imagining this as live action, or would you be good with some form of animation in order to keep a budget down because of, well, I'm going to be honest, just depending, because sometimes it's cheaper to do things like more animated style, and watching things like Clone Wars and Rebels, you
Hmm.
can have a decent adult enough story with animated, and with things like The Mandalorian, not just because of the actors, but because of the effects and everything, the budgets get really high. How are you imagining this, and would you be how are you imagining this first, and would you be okay with the other medium
I'm
if you
going to
had to?
answer your questions in reverse. I'd be fine with the other medium. I always
Okay.
saw this as a live action story.
Okay.
But now that you bring it up, yeah, this could work out well as a something like Rebels or Clone Wars or even the Bad
The
Bunch.
Bad
Is
Batch
Bad Batch? Sorry, Bunch.
and the Tales of the Jedi and Tales of the Empire that they're doing now, and yep. Okay, cool.
So that would actually make sense from a budgetary standpoint. Plus, voice actors age a lot slower than live action actors, which isn't true. Everyone ages 1 second at a time. But from a practical standpoint of filmmaking, of storytelling, your voice stays the same for decades after you get through puberty and you hit adulthood around 25 or whatever. Your voice stays roughly the same. There are changes to it. Most famously, Michael Dorn, who played Worf, by keeping
Hmm.
his voice low for over a decade of playing Worf, um, his voice is actually at a lower register than when he first started as Worf. So there
And
can't you go ahead.
oh, sorry, I was going to say, and oh, I just lost her name, but the voice actor for Toph in Avatar: The Last Airbender, she can still pretty much perfectly do that voice, even though it's been, what, 12 years, 15 years, whatever.
Yeah, and she was a kid when she was actually playing Toph.
Actually,
Um,
a lot of them can still do their voices,
oh
uh,
yeah, it's
especially
impressive if you go to a con.
yeah. I mean, it makes sense for the second Uncle Iroh, but yeah.
I'm not opposed to that. I think it could work out pretty well, but a lot of the things I wanted to cover, I'd have to tone down for a cartoon because whether I like it or not, most Americans consider cartoons to be
For children.
more for children. I don't think I would have to lose a lot of the story. We can call drugs spice, but I was thinking of something closer to CSI, less than Criminal Minds, but maybe even The Rookie with Nathan Fillion there. Something at that level where we're still dealing with this stuff, but they don't show as much of it as they do on Criminal Minds or CSI. Not that CSI is particularly bad as far as
Um,
gore goes.
I mean, it's Disney, and I'm watching X-Men '97, and it gets pretty dark, and the body count is much higher than the original X-Men Fox series, so it's all good.
I'm not saying that I would be taken down by that I would be restricted by the company. I'm saying I personally know what the audience is going to be, and I would not be comfortable putting out an animated TV show that
Hmm.
is at that level. Additionally, it's not Star Wars. Star Wars is always family friendly. There's one PG-13 movie in the Lucas 6, and that's Revenge of the Sith. The rest of them are all rated PG. And I'd want to keep the show at, at most PG-13, at very most. And most of it would be less than that.
Fair enough.
And the changes would be explained in a way that a 13-year-old or a 12-year-old could understand them without pandering. Not pandering, condescending.
One of my final questions is going to be, who would your main character actually be? You touched briefly on Hal Horn, but said he would probably be a secondary character. What do you have in mind for, like, your main character or your main set of characters?
So my main set of characters, and I would be working with other creators on this, including producers, the money people. I'm sure I would get notes from the company, but so I want to keep it open-ended, not vague, but open-ended. It would start as a buddy comp show with a Solonian and a human as the Corsec cops. Maybe instead of a Solonian, we bring in a different kind of alien, but let's get some aliens back into Star Wars. We don't see enough of them as main
Hmm.
characters. And if it's live action, I want practical effects. I want them to be putting on makeup or a costume. I don't want CGI. Something more akin to, say, the Orville or Chewbacca. It shouldn't be a Wookiee, but something along that line. And those would be the two main characters, but like Starsky and Hutch or whatever. But it wouldn't just follow them. There would be supporting characters. We'd probably have a medical tech who does the autopsies. Though I'm not sure how deep we want to get into that. We'd probably have tech characters doing the CSI on crime scenes if there are crime scenes. And we'd have other people who flew with them if they needed to fly somewhere. And what can we market? So not only am I keeping it open-ended for the creatives, let's keep it open-ended for the toys, because Hasbro is currently the licensee, but whoever it is at the time, what toys do they think are going to sell? What toys have sold in the past? If we're doing this, then we're not only going to have our two main heroes and they're supporting, and other detectives that they work with are Corsec agents, and the villain toys. So we want those 3 and 3/4 inch toys, are preferably made relatively inexpensively, so anyone can buy them. We're not going for the collector market here. We're trying to get back into the broad appeal market, because that's really the market Star Wars needs to hit. I mean, really needs to hit. I would go for that. There'd be play sets. We'd be able to sell their station house. We'd be able to sell their ship or ships if they both have starfighters, because Corsec used freighters, starfighters, and capital ships. Smaller capital ships like the Corellian Corvette and the Corellian gunship, and the Corellian Corvette and the Marauder Corvette. And sorry, my nerd is showing. Imagine that, talking about a Star Wars show. My nerd is showing. I'm getting a little too nerdy now. So I'm going to dial that back. So we'd be able to sell the play sets. We'd be able to sell the vehicles. We'd have enemy vehicles. We'd maybe even have a swoop gang as one of the bad guys. We'd have aliens when they're going to different planets. So this isn't going to be super cheap to produce, but if it brings people back, and I'd have a big focus on the quality of the story. Every episode you would have, just like most cop procedurals, police procedurals, you would have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You'd have a crime that they solve that episode, and then ongoing crimes and ongoing problems with the political situation that's happening, and the world is changing around the galaxy is changing around them. And maybe work in some fan favorites here and there, some guest appearances, maybe a young Lando Calrissian or a young Han Solo. Maybe not, because that's pretty cheesy, and definitely not something I'd want to work in first season unless I actually had something I wouldn't want to work in at all unless I had a good story for them that fit with whatever continuity we're putting this into. Boba Fett was operating during this time period as a young bounty hunter. Aura Singh, my personal favorite character from both Rebels and the Clone Wars. We would definitely have some problems and dealings with Hondo Naka, Hondo Naka, Hondo Naka. All of that's a lie. Can we put a link into his channel?
Oh, yes. We'll definitely put a link into Rowan.
Yeah, Rowan the Bard, or whatever he's calling his channel these days.
Twin Sons Entertainment, but he changed some stuff. Twin Sons Entertainment.
Twin Sons Entertainment. So,
yeah,
great guy. Look him up. But yeah, and I want to incorporate some of his songs and then bring bring Rowan the Bard in to create some songs. So this is before Alderaan blows up, so we can't use the Alderaan
Ghosts
song.
of Alderaan. Yeah.
Ghosts of Alderaan song. We can't use the Old Man Thrawn song, but we could use the Hydian Way song that he wrote. Especially since they're dealing with smugglers. We have them focused not necessarily on homicide, like they're not Hollywood Homicide, Corsec, but maybe these guys are focused on smuggling operations, so we can do more space stuff. There's a ton of stories to be told in this scenario. So,
all right. Well,
any other questions for me?
I think that is going to be it for my questions for you. Well, we thank you very much for being our very special guest on this episode of Blam Blam Truckers. We hope to have you visit again. Oh, wait. Truckers, thank you for joining us. Again, if you liked the episode, hit that like button. If you didn't like it, well, yeah, if you didn't like it, still subscribe if you'd like. But
Comment.
Hit-
Tell us how stupid we are. Tell me why
Exact-
I'm wrong.
Not gonna joke. And yeah, hit the bell notification if you do hit subscribe, just so that you can get notified of our new videos.
Should I sing the subscribe song, or did we?
You
This
did
is
it
too
already
much.
in the beginning.
Oh, fair enough. I didn't think that was this episode. Fair enough.
I thought it was this episode.
All right.
Okay. Either way. All right. Well, thank you, truckers, and we will catch you next time.